I can't remember ever interacting with a franchise that I truly enjoyed without delving into its fandom. And now it seems impossible to enjoy something without searching for fan art or fan fiction or creating my own after finishing it. After all, when I fall in love with a character or a world, it can be almost painful to leave it behind. And while rewatching or rereading may continue to bring that same feeling of joy that accompanied the first time I'd encountered it, there's something particularly joyful about connecting with others that makes fandom so tantalizing. Fandom and fanfiction, while often considered to be a modern creation, has been around for a very long time. Strictly speaking, it's existed since the 1300s. Don't believe me? The Divine Comedy is a long narrative poem extrapolating on the nature of hell. Essentially, it's Bible fanfiction. But the modern sort that most people think of began with Star Trek, also commonly credited with the first slash pairing. Fanfiction has always been fringe culture, but just as conventions and cosplay have slowly moved into the realm of popular culture and polite society, so has fandom as a whole. Just look at Archive of Our Own. Just last year it received the Hugo Award. However, it is far from the first archive to receive wider recognition. In recent years, fanfiction and fandom have grown to such heights that it's impossible to deny the influence it's achieved. But with such large swaths of fandom being in their 20s or younger, many may not know the history of fanfiction or relate to the current culture we have today. So before I begin to talk about the nature of shipping, let's discuss the history of fanfiction. As I stated before, fanfiction has been around just as long as the written word. However, our modern definition began with the fanzine. A fanzine, in simple terms, is a fan magazine. The first of which was technically The Comet, a science fiction fanzine published in 1930 by the Science Correspondence Club in Chicago. However, the term fanzine wasn't coined until 1940 by Russ Chauvenet in the October edition of Detours, and the type of fanzine that most people correlate to that phrase didn't begin until the airing of Star Trek. This is because few could afford to print professionally until photocopying became cheaper in the 1970s. In September 1967, the first media fanzine, called Spocknalia, was published by members of the Lunarians. They hoped that fanzines such as Spocknalia would be recognized by the broader science fiction fan community in traditional ways, such as the Hugo Award for Best Fanzine, which is kind of cool considering AO3's Hugo Award in 2019. All 5 of his issues were published while the show was still on the air, and included letters from the DC Fontana, Gene Roddenberry, and most of the cast members. This is one of the first fan publications to achieve such renown, and have such an effect on popular culture. Gene Roddenberry even insisted that new writers and crew read Spocknalia before impacting the show. Many other Star Trek zines followed, as well as others from other fandoms, eventually leading to the type of fandom that we experience today. With Star Trek, so began the rise of Slash. In the late 1970s, fiction that included gay sexual relationships, first appearing with Kirk/Spock, began to appear in zines. The phrase slash came from the slash mark used in ad zines to differentiate a K&S story, which denoted friendship, from a K/S story, which would have a romantic or sexual bent between the characters. Another popular franchise for fanzines was Star Wars, which surpassed Star Trek fanzine sales by the time The Empire Strikes Back was released in 1980. However, this rise in popularity led to one of the first of many episodes in which a creator grew upset with the fandom portrayal of the characters. In 1981, Star Wars director George Lucas threatened to sue fanzine publishers who distributed zines featuring Star Wars characters in sexually explicit stories or art. Some of this persecution can be found in later works by Anne Rice, J.K. Rowling, and for X-Files fanfiction, the majority of which began during the rise of the internet. Those of us who've been online and posting for a while may remember terms such as lemon, line, don't like, don't read, as well as those disclaimers at the top of every fic, often reading something like, I don't make money off of this work, please don't sue, or in later years, a somewhat snarky, insert obligatory disclaimer here. While these terms and disclaimers have more or less faded away in present fandom, they were a mainstay before the purges. During the infant years of the internet, before fanfiction.net and Wattpad and Archive of Our Own, there were individual websites for each individual fandom. Star Trek was hosted by fans on a site over here, and Star Wars was on another one over there. Many of these sites are gone now, and while others are accessible only through the Wayback Machine, others are still running, and others yet have had their content added to Archive of Their Own for future generations to review. Sites such as Usenet, TrekFanfiction.net, and Glitterberries, a Daria website created in 1999, were the start of internet fanfiction communities, and were often regarded as even more geeky and nerdy than the more well-known hobby of going to conventions. There was a sense of shame involved in participating, and this was even before Anne Rice's famous cease and desist letters went out. Later, as the internet grew, fanfiction began to diversify and get more organized, as sites regarding fanfiction as a whole, rather than individual subsets, began to rise in popularity. These monoliths often had overlapping audiences, as they could be divided into 2 main types: blogging and archive sites. Archive sites catalog their submissions and use categories and filters to make them easy to find. They tend to exclusively host fanfiction, and stories posted to them are organized. On blogging sites, writers post fanfiction to their own pages or feeds, and while stories are typically tagged, potential readers must actively seek them out and know what to search. This means that readers not involved with the fandom are less likely to find it, but allows blogging-style sites to host more content, including non-fan works, art, quizzes, and discussions. Some sites that fall under the archive umbrella include fanfiction.net, Archive of Our Own, and adultfanfiction.net, as well as individual fanfiction sites, like those early sites listed previously. One of the earliest additions to the archive type of fanfiction sites is the aptly named fanfiction.net. Fanfiction.net was founded in 1998 and claims over 2.2 million registered users. Despite being popular for its relatively easy search system and a large collection of works, its receptacle of fanfiction mostly includes those most active before 2007, before Archive of Our Own started. This is due to its many restrictions, including not allowing explicit content, submissions based on works by authors who have expressed opposition to fanfiction, including, most notably, Anne Rice and Archie Comics, non-stories such as lists, bloopers, polls, and previews, or challenges, stories featuring real people, such as actors, musicians, and celebrities, and any form of interactive entry, including choose your own adventure, second person, or you-based Q&As. Blogging sites are mostly used for their community. LiveJournal, a blogging platform founded in 1999, allowed users to create internet-based online communities. Posts to LiveJournal could include fan art and a variety of non-story content, and serve as a place for fandoms to engage with themselves, especially through discussion, in a way that remains restricted on fanfiction.net. There was an interdependency between all these sites, as the restrictions enacted on one site would not exist on another. In the same era, Quota, which allows users to read or write a story, book, quiz, survey, poll, including in a fanfiction category, and adultfanfiction.org, formerly adultfanfiction.net, which specifically hosted 18-plus content but disallowed lists, polls, and blogs, rose to popularity as well to fill in the gaps in what fanfiction.net offered. As a result, if a fanfiction.net user wanted to write explicit stories, they would simply leave links to their LiveJournal or coursive profiles on their fanfiction.net author profile. The two sites had no real integration, but their user bases overlapped significantly. This is part of why the May 2007 LiveJournal deletions wrecked and angered the community, as the site had systematically and without warning deleted and banned hundreds of journals for impermissible content. The incident had targeted and deleted a number of fandom journals, particularly those featuring slash character pairings, rape survivor support groups, rape, incest, and pedophilia survivors' personal journals, character-based RPG journals, and a discussion group for the novel Lolita. Many of these were later restored, but bowled through. A similar incident happened only 3 months later. In 2012, Fanfiction.net had similar purges of banned content, when thousands of stories were removed for violations of its guidelines. In the aftermath of these incidents, Tumblr and Archive of Our Own rose in popularity, bringing with them the modern age of fanfiction. In February 2007, for better or worse, Tumblr came online. Tumblr communities organized themselves by using tagging and reblogging, which allows for a great overlap of fanish and non-fan content. The ability to host a diverse amount of content and the adult content policy, which changed in 2018, replaced LiveJournal in functionality. Archive of Our Own was created in 2008 and entered open beta in November 2009. Archive of Our Own is fan-run. It was made in direct response to fanlib.com and now defunct corporate-driven multi-fandom fic archive. The site continues to be run by fanfic readers for fanfic readers, with no ads and solely donation supported, allowing anything, het, slash, real person fiction, smut, one underage character, kink, highly adult stories, anything that directly addressed what the community wanted from an archive, which set it apart from its precursors and competitors. In current day, more stories are still hosted on fanfiction.net, but more modern fandoms are hosted on AO3, showing a generational shift from older site to the newer one. And that covers the history of fanfiction, more or less up to modern day. While there are most definitely sites and communities I left out either for brevity or a lack of research available, this is the gist of what fandom has looked like since its conception. As you can see, shipping has been around since the very beginning. In recent years, there's been a rise in Puritan thinking in what is and isn't morally and socially allowed in fanfiction, as well as rising stakes and attention towards shipping and ship wars. Well, this is a topic I'd like to discuss in a later video. Right now, I'd like to focus on the nature of shipping itself. It is my honest opinion that any ship can be broken down into two components: the person you are attracted to and the person you identify with. While this may be influenced by other factors such as chemistry within the show or aesthetic preferences, this point still stands. Take a look at popular ships like Spock/Bones, Lance and Keith, or more recently, Geralt/Jaskier. In each of these, the person most commonly identified with is often infantilized and loaded with negative yet endearing traits. In Spock/Bones fanfiction, Bones is often cast in a more feminine light, is shown as weaker in comparison to Spock, and is often the subject of womp works, in which a character is hurt badly and then saved or taken care of. In Lance/Keith, Lance is often depicted as depressed, anxious, and sometimes suicidal, and is shown as more feminine, and is hurt or injured more often than other characters. And finally, in The Witcher, Jaskier has been depicted as much smaller and weaker than Geralt, is hurt more often, and is shown to be substantially more feminine than he is in canon. While it's true that all these characters have some traits that may fall under these extrapolated on in canon, these depictions are more caricatures than real versions of these characters. It's not necessarily a bad or a good thing, it's just a thing that is. The reason why I attribute infantilization with the person most identified with is due to my personal experience with Voltron Legendary Defender. In its heyday, I had 3 moderately popular Tumblrs and wrote over 100,000 words in fanfiction for it. I was there during the height of its popularity, and I was there during its fall. Lance was unequivocally the fan favorite. Oh sure, Keith and Shiro had their fans, but even now Lance is tagged in the majority of fanfiction posted to Archive of Our Own under the Voltron tag. On Tumblr, the correlation between a creator's personal headcanons, often dealing with their own mental illnesses and flaws, and how they saw them reflected in Lance, was very strong. In the show, there are several instances in which Lance reveals that he has self-value problems, as well as several instances revealing anxieties or depressive thoughts. These few instances, which were greatly outnumbered by moments of humor and comedy, are the seeds on which the overwhelming amount of what I like to call woobification is built on. In Star Trek TOS, the 3rd season treats Bones to a large amount of damsel roles, likely in response to his rise in status to become part of the Triumvirate, which was overlooked in previous seasons. In the 3rd season, he gets beaten and almost killed, tortured, and this, along with his self-sacrificing nature shown over the course of the show, created the basis for his eventual woobification. And finally, in The Witcher, Jaskier, despite being only a few inches shorter than Geralt, is relegated to a damsel role, woobified excessively in fandom due to the few instances highlighting him as the weaker of the pair. He asks Geralt to be his bodyguard during a dinner with royals, loses his voice to Geralt's reckless wish, and gets yelled at. These 3 instances were all it took, and now the Jaskier written and drawn in fandom is entirely less subtle in its portrayal of his character. This, in and of itself, mirrors the seme and uke denominations used in yaoi, and carried over from manga and anime fandoms. Seme means top, and uke means bottom, and while this usually refers to sexual positions, it also tends to refer to personality traits. I believe that this is one way that early Western fandom was able to conceptualize queer relationships, by making them one into a typically feminine character, and one into the more masculine character. While original Slash stories such as Kirk/Spock were primarily enjoyed because of the lack of power imbalances, these imbalances have made a return. Fanfiction, ever since its inception, has always had a queer tilt to it. Part of why Anne Rice persecuted fanfiction so harshly is because her work inspired queer interpretations of her characters, which she didn't like. It'd be incorrect to say that queerness is the majority, but it's no minority either. While the world has become much kinder to LGBT people in recent years, the attitudes commonly held in fanfiction's beginning years still remain. Despite everything, the need to force characters into boxes of protector and protected, carer and cared for, masculine and feminine, remains. It can be seen in shipping, and how we intrinsically relate to them in this female-led hobby, and how these attitudes are shown in the works we create. Because the nature of fanfiction is so expansive, I'll be returning to this topic to discuss things like ship wars, both in general and in relation to specific fandoms, as well as other big fandom ideas and concepts, like big-name fans and their influence on fandom, and the current divide on morality and puritanism in fanfiction. For now, this is where we part. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.